It looks like Trump's charm offensive has ended before it even began. He hasn't even entered office, and yet he and his team are already learning the hard way that attempting to do Putin's bidding by undermining alliances in the West isn't going to be as easy as he'd hoped. According to the BBC, a close ally of Donald Trump said Britain would have to choose between the US and UK's special relationship and closer ties to the EU, which Trump describes as a mini-China. Stephen Moore told the BBC that if the UK moved toward more of an American model of economic freedom, it would spur the Trump administration's willingness to the free trade agreement with the UK. The notion that we have to choose, which prompted this response from the UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
So I want to be clear at the outset, against the backdrop of these dangerous times, the idea that we must choose between our allies, that somehow we're with either America or Europe, is plain wrong. I reject it utterly. Attlee did not choose between allies. Churchill did not choose. The national interest demands that we work with both.
And of course, it's clear why Trump wants to impose this false choice. His goal, and the goal of those around him, is to weaken Europe and all democratic nations because those aren't the governments that Donald Trump wants to align himself with. Trump wants to align himself with Putin's autocratic regime in Russia, with Kim Jong-un's dictatorship in North Korea, with Viktor Orban's illiberal democracy in Hungary. In fact, the guy who issued this false choice in the first place, Stephen Moore, is an avowed opponent of democracy. Don't take my word for it, take his.
Capitalism is a lot more important than democracy. I'm not even a big believer in democracy. I always say that democracy can be two wolves and a sheep deciding on what to have for dinner.
So are you really surprised that a guy who will go on TV to undermine democracy would then advocate for a policy that also undermines democracy? Which is probably why Starmer wasn't the only British official to push back against Trump. Scottish Member of Parliament Patrick Harvey had zero qualms about calling out Donald Trump for exactly who he is.
Yesterday, the First Minister offered congratulations to the convicted felon Donald Trump on his re-election. Writing officially on behalf of the Scottish Government, he wrote that he is sure Scotland's cultural and social ties with the US will flourish during the presidency of a misogynist, a climate denier, a fraudster, a conspiracy monger, a racist, a far-right politician who tried to overturn an election result both covertly and by inciting violence. Words fail me. What social and cultural ties does the First Minister really think will benefit from a relationship with such a man? And more importantly, what has the First Minister done so far to reach out to the marginalised and vulnerable people whose lives are most directly threatened by a second Trump term?
Granted, statements like that are completely expected, since Donald Trump has been nothing but hostile to our allies since the moment he stepped onto the political scene. Consider his first statement since becoming president-elect, that he's going to launch a trade war with Mexico and Canada. That announcement, as expected, was met with just a tad bit more resistance than Trump had anticipated, with both Mexico and Canada expressing pushback and even teasing the prospect of reciprocal tariffs. Turns out that Canada just took it a step further now, with Canadian politicians now humoring the notion of a trade war and also gearing up for one. According to reporting, other members of Canada's parliament are calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to ready a war room for the coming battle over tariffs with the United States. Quote, "The only thing a bully responds to is strength. So where's our plan to fight back? Where is our war room?" Where is our war room is generally not the tone you want to strike with one of your closest allies and top trading partners before your administration even takes office. Just, for starters. In fact, members of Canada's Liberal and Conservative parties are debating ways that Trudeau could promote a Canada First policy now. In other words, thanks to Donald Trump and his rhetoric, now one of our allies, with whom we do over $900 billion per year in trade, is considering an isolationist policy. Do you think that helps or hurts the United States? Do you think Canada retreating to isolationism in response to Trump's trade war threats is going to make trade easier or more difficult between our two nations? I mean, I'm certainly no genius who wrote The Art of the Deal, but this seems to be a pretty shitty deal. And it's not going much better with our neighbor to the south. Trump took to Truth Social, writing, "Just had a wonderful conversation with the new president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. She has agreed to stop migration through Mexico and into the United States, effectively closing our southern border. We also talked about what could be done to stop the massive drug inflow into the U.S. and also U.S. consumption of these drugs. A very productive conversation." And not even a few hours after that was posted, this news popped up. Mexican president responds to Trump saying no plan to close the border. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum worked quickly to respond to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's claims that she would stop migration into the United States, saying Wednesday the country did not plan to close its border. Quote, "Mexico's position is not to close borders, but to build bridges between governments and communities." In other words, even before he stepped foot into the Oval Office, Trump is already lying to try and frame himself as some master negotiator, some master deal maker. In reality, there is no deal.
The two leaders spoke by phone just days after Trump threatened to impose a 25% tariff on all Mexican goods if the country does not stop the flow of drugs and migrants.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum responding to those threats in a letter to Donald Trump, writing, quote, "Neither threats nor tariffs will solve the issue of migration or drug consumption."
And surprise, surprise, Trump is spewing straight bullshit to his audience who, to be clear, will never know that what he said is a total lie. We are more likely to see the sun burn out tomorrow than for Trump to post a correction or even simply acknowledge the fact that what he wrote is a lie. But this is what he does. He exists in a completely separate plane of reality where he strikes brilliant deals and everybody applauds him even when they don't. In his reality, he built wall across the entirety of the southern border, and it doesn't matter at all that he only built 52 miles of wall after 4 years in office. In his reality, he was the rightful winner of the 2020 election because of massive fraud by the evil communist Marxist Democrats, and it doesn't matter that that logic would also suggest that Democrats could have also cheated this year if they were capable of it last time. None of that matters as far as Donald Trump is concerned. All he's concerned with is that he's always right and everybody else is always wrong. And if that means that we're subjected to cognitive dissonance every single day, so be it. So look, it's almost foolish to say that Trump is committing gaffes by insulting and alienating us from our allies because in reality, he is doing it on purpose. It's not a gaffe. It's not a mistake. He wants to align himself with our enemies. He wants to distance the U.S. from its allies. He wants to upset the global alliance that's responsible for the longest period of peace and prosperity in modern American history. When you elect somebody who is diametrically opposed to democracy, opposed to our Constitution, opposed to our laws and statutes, then you get somebody who is opposed to other democracies. And when more of our allies' leaders continue to speak out against him, all that Trump will have accomplished is making the U.S. a pariah on the world stage. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.